Tonight's lesson is going to be a little bit different. And I also want to say that we're not going to ruin anything for anybody. But it is going to be a different topic, a different idea that we don't see presented very much in a lesson type thing, but yet it is, well, it's talked about quite a bit at this time of year. You know, this is a very beautiful picture. And this is probably the picture that many of us have in mind. And when we look at this picture, we think about the years that have gone by, perhaps when we were children, and what the holiday meant to us at that time. Perhaps when we look at this picture, we think of and be reminded of the fact that this is a favorite time of year for many people. It is without a doubt my favorite time of year. In fact, if you was to ask my family, they would tell you that this is my favorite holiday. I've always liked this time of year. I've always liked this particular holiday since I was a little boy. And I'm sure that's the way it is with many of us. We like this particular holiday. But it is also a time of question. Several questions. Now, if we was to ask you what is perhaps the most asked question, what would it be? What would it be? Well, without a doubt, the most asked question, was Christ born on December the 25th? That is a question that is asked by many people. In fact, what does man have to say in response to this question?
Most say yes.
Most say yes. In fact, just today as we were driving back from lunch in, where were we at? Parkersburg. Driving through Vienna. There, sitting in the yard of a denominational religious group, a denominational building, was sitting a large nativity scene. And of course the sign on it said, "Unto us a child is born." And so even in the religious world, man says this was the time that Jesus was born. But you and I need to ask what? What do we need to ask?
Show me where that says that in the Bible.
Okay, show me where it says that in the Bible. Man says he was born on December the 25th. We need to ask ourselves, okay, but what does the Bible say about Jesus and his birthday? What does the Bible say? Anybody want to give a simple answer to that?
He was born in Bethlehem.
Okay, he was born in Bethlehem. Says he was born. What else does the Bible say?
They were born there for taxes, so December's not likely.
Okay. All right, he was born the time of taxes or the time of a census. Okay, it can be one or the other. In fact, in the New Testament, it can be translated either way. Most believe it was a time of census. But let's begin with what man has to say. You know, what does man say about Jesus and his birthday? Well, man, believe it or not, has a lot to say. And it's not just December the 25th. It's not. Man has a lot to say. In fact, December the 25th began as a pagan holiday. And many scholars, many people of old, well, they've had a lot to say about December the 25th. Clement of Alexandria, who was a Christian theologian who lived in between 150 A.D. and 215 A.D., he places the birth of Christ on May the 20th. That would be our modern day calendar, on May the 20th. Others give other dates. The document that was written in North Africa around 243 A.D. says no, it wasn't May the 20th. It was instead March the 28th. So you see, even man doesn't agree. And then we have this fella, Hippolytus. He was a Roman theologian. Now, get a load of this fella. He gives a date of when Jesus was born, and he bases it upon the anniversary of when the world was created. And according to him, the world was created on March the 25th. And so on the anniversary of the world being created, 9 months later, Jesus was born on December the 25th. And so man has a lot to say about it. And there are others who say who believe that he was born on December the 25th. Who's right? Who's wrong?
We don't know.
We don't know. But there is one thing we do know based upon the scriptures, and we'll look at that here in a minute. So this is what man has to say, but we've got to ask ourselves, what does the Bible say? Was Jesus born on December the 25th? Was he born on May the 20th? Was he born on March the 28th? Or was he born on some other date? Well, the fact of the matter is, nowhere in the Bible is the date of Christ's birth given to us. Nowhere is it given. Now, we can speculate as to why that is. And some say, well, it's more important that we remember his death, but we don't even know for exactly the date of his death. So that's not really a very valid argument. Why we don't know? God simply did not desire to tell us. Where did Christmas and December the 25th come from? Well, friends, it did not come from God. It came instead from man. In fact, I've heard many of, especially those studying on our Tuesday morning Bible class, they have said to me that it was a pagan holiday. Well, in all honesty, and once again, we're not going to ruin anything for anybody. It did start off as a pagan holiday, December the 25th. Now, first of all, what is a pagan? What is a pagan? Okay. Can we expound on that some?
I don't know what he said.
Idol worshiper.
Any god but God.
Okay, any god but God. A pagan, by definition, is someone who believes that there is more than just one God. Okay? And so there are pagans who celebrate the 25th of December as the birth date of Nimrod. Now, does anybody know who Nimrod was? Anybody know? Who was Nimrod? Well, Nimrod is actually a Bible character. In fact, Nimrod was a however many great-grandson of Noah. He was from the family of Ham. Turn, if you will, to the book of Genesis. The book of Genesis. Genesis chapter 10. Now, we begin in chapter 10 with the generation. So here we have another genealogy. Okay? Another genealogy. All those names, right? So here we have another genealogy. And it begins with the genealogy of Noah's son Japheth. Well, you get down to verse 6, and here you have the genealogy of his son Ham. And in verse 8 of that genealogy, and Cush begot Nimrod, and he became a mighty one on earth. Now, does that help you?
No.
What was Nimrod? Okay, well, let's bring in the next verse or two. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord, verse 9. Wherefore it was said, even as Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord. And the beginning of his what? the beginning of his kingdom. Okay, does that give us a hint? Nimrod was a what? He was a king. He was a king, as we read in the last part of there, verse 10, of Shinar. Now, Shinar had what would become a very famous village by the name of Babel. You remember what happened that village became known as Babel? Well, okay, God confused their language. They built in Genesis chapter 11. They built a great tower that was going to reach up into the heavens. Let's just turn to Genesis chapter 11. And let's read beginning in verse 1. We're going to read down through verse 9. Nimrod was the king of this kingdom. The king of this kingdom. Okay, beginning in verse 1. And the whole earth was one language and of one speech. What does that mean? Everybody spoke the same language. They all spoke English, right? They all spoke the same language. Okay. Did that lead them into some trouble? Yeah. And it came to pass, verse 2, as they journeyed from the east, that they found a plain in the land of Shinar. And they dwelt there. And they said one to another, Go to, let us make brick, and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone, and slime they had for mortar. And they said, Go to, and let us build us a city and a tower, whose top may reach into the heavens. Let us make us a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth. And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower, which the children of men built. And the Lord said, Behold, the people is one, and they have all one language, and this they begin to do, and now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do. Go to, and let us go down, and there confound their speech, that they may not understand another one's speech. And so the Lord scattered them abroad from hence upon the face of the earth, and they left off to build that city. Therefore the name of it was called Babel, because the Lord did there confound the language of all the earth. And from hence did the Lord scatter them abroad upon the face of all the earth. And so Nimrod was their king. And they celebrated December the 25th on our calendar as his birthday. Well, other pagans also celebrated the 25th as the birth date of the sun god known as Sol. And so it started off as a pagan holiday, celebrating birthdays. But then along come the Catholics and their Pope, who called himself Leo, in AD 440. The Catholics come along, and Pope Leo declared that there was going to be a day known as Christ's Mass Day. Christ's Mass Day. Now, who declared that day? Leo did. He picked the day. And he said that that was the day of Christ's birth. Who did it? Man did it. Because what is the Pope? The Pope is not the left hand of God, as he claims to be. The Pope is no one but a man. And so a man declared December the 25th to be Christmas, or the day in which Christ was born. But what does the Bible say? The Bible, nowhere does it refer to Christmas or December the 25th. That all came from man. What does the Bible say? Well, let's read the different Bible accounts. Does the Bible teach us in any way Does it give us in any way? May the 20th or March the 28th or December the 25th. Does it give us any date whatsoever? Well, let's just see what the Bible has to say. In fact, let's notice the Bible accounts of Jesus' birth. And let's begin in Matthew chapter 2. Matthew chapter 2. And let's read verses 1 through 9 of that passage. And as we're reading this passage, ask yourself the question, is there a date given? Ask yourself that question. Beginning in verse 1. Now when Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, behold, there came wise men from the east to Jerusalem, saying that he is born King of the Jews, for we have seen his star in the east and are come to worship him. When Herod the king had heard these things, he was troubled, and all of Jerusalem with him. And when he had gathered all the chief priests and the scribes of the people together, he demanded of them where Christ should be born. And they said unto him, in Bethlehem of Judea. For this is written by the prophet. And thou, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, art not the least among the princes of Judah. For out of thee shall come a governor, that shall rule my people Israel. Then Herod, when he had privily called the wise men, inquired of them diligently what time the star appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem, and said, go and search diligently for the young child. And when ye have found him, bring me word again, that I may come and worship him also. And when they had heard the king, they departed. And lo, the star which they saw in the east went before them till it came and stood over where the young child was. Well, before we answer a question, let's go to yet another account. Luke chapter 2. Now keep your finger in Matthew chapter 2. Let's now turn to Luke chapter 2. And let's notice what we are told in verses 1 through 7. Ask yourself the very same question. Is there a date mentioned in this account of Jesus' birth? And it came to pass in those days that there went out a decree from Caesar Augustus that all the world shall be taxed. Okay. In other translations, it reads that all the world shall be enrolled. This could be for a tax, or this could be for a census. Okay. And this taxing was made first when Caesarius was governor of Syria. And they went to be taxed, everyone in his own city. And Joseph went up from Galilee, out of the city of Nazareth, unto Judea, unto the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and lineage of David, to be taxed with Mary, his espoused wife, being great with child. And so it was that while they were there, the days were accomplished that she should be delivered. And she brought forth her firstborn son, and wrapped him in swaddling clothes, and laid him in a manger, because there was no room for them in the inn. Now, friends, in Matthew 2 or in Luke 2, is there a date mentioned in either one of these passages? No. There is no date whatsoever given in either one of these accounts. No dates given. The date of Jesus is nowhere given. But there is something that the Bible does tell us. The Bible does tell us it was in December. It does tell us that. Yeah. You've got to use a little bit of necessary inference. You remember what necessary inference means? What is the meaning of necessary inference? Huh? Okay, kind of context, but necessary inference means what? Drawing conclusions based upon what? Fact that you read of in the context. So using a little bit of necessary inference, and quite frankly, using a little bit of wisdom, a little bit of God-given ability, logic, we can come to this understanding. Jesus was not born on December 25th. How do we know that? Well, go back to Luke chapter 2. Now, we're going to read the first 5 verses again. This time I'm going to read from the Contemporary English translation. Here's the first 5 verses again. About the time Emperor Augustus gave order for the names of all the people to be listed in record books. Okay, now as we said earlier, this could mean that this was for tax purposes. It can mean that it was for a census. What is important for us to remember, Brother James Burton Kaufman in his commentary talks about the fact that these record books still exist. They still exist. You can go back and read them. Verse 2. These first records were made when Quirinius was governor of Syria. Everyone had to go to their own hometown to be listed. That's like us today. My hometown is Clarksburg. And so if it was the law for me to go back to my hometown, I'd have to leave here in Lower Salem, and I'd have to go to Clarksburg for the census to be made. Well, in that day and time, they had to leave from wherever they lived and go back to their hometown for that census. Verse 4. So Joseph had to leave Nazareth in Galilee and go to Bethlehem in Judea. Long ago, Bethlehem had been King David's hometown, and Joseph went there because he was from David's family. And so Bethlehem would be basically his hometown. Mary was engaged to Joseph and traveled with him to Bethlehem, and she was soon going to have a baby. Now, a little bit of necessary inference. He had to go from Bethlehem from Nazareth to Bethlehem. Now, anybody want to guess how great a distance that was? Anybody want to guess? No guesses whatsoever. I'm going to give you as the crow flies. Okay? As the crow flies from Nazareth to Bethlehem. There's the map. Okay, from Nazareth, which is right there, to Bethlehem, which is right here. This is as the crow flies. But you can see from that map, they didn't fly like the crow. They had to go a roundabout route, a traveling road, and so it is a little bit further than the crow flies. But by going from the crow flies, it is from 70 to 76 miles.
So they didn't do it in a day.
They didn't do it in a day. In fact, it most likely took a week. Just for 76 miles, Tom, it took a week? Well, they didn't have a Ford truck to hop into and drive down there. They didn't have a nice vehicle like we have to drive there. They had to get there how? Walk. They had to get there by walking. And so without a doubt, in my mind, it took them a week to get there. Now, let's just suppose. Now, remember, they're traveling 70 to 76 miles, probably 90 or more going that roundabout route. He is traveling with a pregnant woman.
And we like to complain.
Okay. And let's just suppose they did do it in December. They did do it in December.
That's the cold, rainy season.
Ah, okay. Finish that. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Isn't that the cold and rainy season?
Oh, is it?
Well, that's what I read.
December, the average weather for Judea is cold. The low temperature is 40. During that time, rain is likely, along with that 40-degree weather. And even snow is possible. So, would that journey been the best time for a census? Would December been the best time for a journey with a woman who was pregnant?
No.
The weather would simply not be agreeable. And so necessary inference of that passage teaches us, simple logic teaches us, December 25th cannot be the day. But let's not stop there. Let's take a look at the next set of verses. And so, no, it wouldn't have been the proper or the best time to do that. Next set of verses. 7 through 11. Still in Luke chapter 2. Now I'm going back to the King James Version. And she brought forth her firstborn son and wrapped him in swaddling clothes and laid him in a manger because there was no room for them in the inn. And there were in the same country shepherds abiding in the field. Now, what does abiding in the field mean?
They were camping out.
They were basically camping out. In fact, the word abiding in the language New Testament means under the sky. And so they were out in the weather. They were out in the elements. They were out under the open sky, and they were keeping watch over the flock, which means what? Keeping watch means what? They were watching, or they were guarding. Now, Luke tells us here that this guarding took place when? By what? Night. By night. And lo, the angel of the Lord came unto them, and the glory of the Lord shone round about them, and they were sore afraid. And the angel said unto them, Fear not, for behold, I bring you good tidings of great joy, which shall be to all people. For unto you is born this day in the city of David a Savior, which is Christ the Lord. Using necessary inference, just a little bit of logic. Would December have been a good time for them to watch over their sheep at night? Well, remember what the weather's like. The weather is cold, rainy, and snow is possible. And so December would not have been ideal for guarding the sheep by shepherds who were abiding or staying out under the sky. It wouldn't have been the best time to do that. And so you have to answer that question also. No. Well, and so friends, I really doubt that it was December the 25th. In fact, that is the idea that we're simply trying to put out here. That December the 25th was not the day in which Christ was born. It was simply not the day. That's a day that man has picked. Well, should we observe the day? Should we observe it? Once again, we're not going to ruin anything for anybody.
Not as a religious holiday, I don't.
Okay. What has Christmas become? What has it become?
Commercialized.
Well, I don't mean that. What has Christmas become? Okay, a day set aside to recognize what? Okay, that's what it has become. But what else has it become?
Day of giving.
day of giving, right? It has become a day of giving. What else has it become? A day of family. A day of family. Is there anything wrong with giving or a day that you spend with your family? Let's say we decide to celebrate it as Christ's birthday. Is that wrong?
I don't think so.
God Christ said, "I'll put one day ahead of another."
Is it wrong? We don't know the date. So how can we celebrate that as his birthday?
Really, we're going on Matthew 15:9, teaching something that's not taught.
Okay. Teaching something that is not taught. So we have to say, no, we can't celebrate that day as his birthday. What if we do? Why shouldn't we? Okay, we've added something. Why shouldn't we observe that day as Christ's birthday?
Because it's not.
Because it's not. It's not. But yet, if we observe it as Christ's birthday, what are each of us telling the people of the world?
That you don't have to celebrate it every other day.
Okay. What are we teaching the people of the world? What are we saying to the people of the world?
We agree with this. You're right.
That we agree with it. That we agree with it.
We're
Okay.
saying what the Bible says is irrelevant.
Yeah, exactly right. Or what the Bible, in this case, what the Bible doesn't say is irrelevant. So, what has it become? It has become a day of giving. It has become a day of family. Is it wrong for us to observe the day as a time of family? No. In fact, what has God said? What has God said about children? What has God said about children?
We're to be like children.
Okay, we're to be like children. But what does he say about children? Children, friends, are a gift from God. Psalms 127. In Psalms 127, we are told, children are a gift from God, a productive womb, the Lord's reward. As arrows in the hand of a warrior, so also are children born during one's youth. How blessed is the man whose quiver is full of them. He will not be ashamed as they confront their enemies at the city gate. And so family is a blessing from God. Would it be wrong for us to celebrate that blessing? No.
No, but if we single it out for December 25th, as the world does, does that not make us disappointed? Then even though we're not saying that we're celebrating Christ's birthday, but we are celebrating on that day.
Okay. Do we single it out? Or do we celebrate family every day?
Well, yeah, we do.
Okay. That makes us a little bit different from the world, doesn't it?
Maybe.
Maybe. What does God have to say about giving?
Well, we're ought to give.
Okay, we ought to give. Now, we're not talking about giving up
I
here.
know, we're,
But what does God say about giving?
Better gift than to receive.
It is more blessed to give than to receive. We celebrate that day as a time of family and as a time of giving. We're not breaking any law of God. But if we celebrate it as the birth of Christ, we're going beyond what the Bible has said and doing what man has said.
Well, also give us an opportunity to talk to others about
Okay.
Christ. And
Okay.
because they're more open to listening about stuff.
Okay. All right. So, Janet, that kind of goes back to what you were saying just a little bit ago. This gives us the opportunity, if somebody asks us, somebody talks to us about this holiday, it gives us the opportunity to do what? To teach.
I think it's definitely a positive too, especially in the world that we live in today, that people do acknowledge God.
Exactly right. Exactly right. I remember a class that Chuck taught years ago.
Were you here?
Now, if I remember the class, then where will I be?
He took his work over there.
You didn't get a brain transplant while you had all this work done, right? Okay. In which Chuck talked about that very thing. Anytime that we can get the world or people to think about Christ, it is a good thing. It is a good
I
thing.
agree.
You agree?
That when you go by my house and my Christmas tree is in my window, which it's not because I don't deck the tree up anymore because it just is a bother. But I used to. But am I not telling the world that, yes, I'm celebrating because look, I have a Christmas tree.
Okay. What could you be celebrating?
Well, it was always, okay, we're all gonna get together, we're gonna have gifts, we're gonna have food and lots of desserts, and we're gonna spend the day together.
You mean it's a day of eating now too?
Yes, that's my favorite thing.
But also, you know, if you think it's wrong, you shouldn't be doing it.
Okay.
But, we have to be careful judging other people.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree.
Yeah.
Exactly
But I
right.
think in Romans 14 applies here.
Okay.
But this, in verse 5, it says, one person esteems one day as better than another, another esteems all days alike. Each one should be fully convinced in their own minds. The one who observes the day, observe it in honor of the Lord. The one who eats, eat in honor of the Lord, since he gives thanks to God, while the one who abstains in honor of the Lord, as giving thanks to God. So it's how we treat that
How we
day.
treat it.
It's not the day or what it's set up to be, but it's how we treat it. If we want to have a feast in honor of God, we eat in honor of God. If we want to fast in honor of God, we fast in honor of God. If we want a special day, they had a lot of those back under the Jewish law, and they still practice those at that time. And I think Paul was telling the Romans here that it wasn't wrong for them to do that as long as they done it in the right manner, for the right purpose.
Exactly right. Okay. So we've got to quit. We can go on and talk about this probably the rest of the night, right? But we got to quit. Our time is almost up, and I wasn't tricked by the clock tonight. But our time's almost up. This just gives you a little bit of an idea of what the Bible does and does not say about Christ and his birth. Okay, so we want to extend the invitation. If we have anyone here this evening who needs to come in obedience to the gospel, why don't you come right now? If you've erred in your faith in some way, we're willing and very much wanting to help you to get back on the right track. Why not come? Why together?